Hello and welcome, star people. This is the Outlaw Astrology Podcast, and I'm your intrepid, stargazing host, APM. In today's topic, we're going to step into another unsolved crime that has been writ large in the United States, and also, the subject of much literature, films, books, etc., and that is the Black Dahlia murder. And trigger warning, there might be some descriptions, brief, of the murder scene. I'm going to keep it as clean as I can. This is an astrology podcast, not a true crime podcast. And some housekeeping. If you like what you're hearing, please share, please like, and please review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, but in particular Spotify and iTunes. And with that, let's dive deep into the Black Dahlia murders, or murder. Okay, so let me set the scene for you. Los Angeles, the 15th of January, 1947. Now keep in mind that LA has a vibe to it. And the vibe that LA has is that it's palm trees, and it's sunshine, and it's pretty stars and handsome men. And this is 1947, so the golden age of Hollywood was very much in place. That studio system we're all famously knowing, is where they created stars and made them the most beautiful, the most glamorous, the most handsome, the most wonderful. So it was kind of a age of glamour and mystery, because there was a distance between you, the watcher, and the star. And so you could kind of make up any story you liked about the star, because you wouldn't have had that much information. You would have only had what the studio was willing to share. And they were really good at creating stories and images for these people so that they came off as modern gods and demigods, demigoddesses and goddesses. And so what we're going to do is she's called the Black Dahlia, but her name was actually Elizabeth Short. And called the Black Dahlia, there was a film that came out in 1946, that'd be the year before this crime, and it was called The Blue Dahlia. It was a film noir type thing, and I am a major fancier of films, film noir, because they were always so beautifully shot. So Elizabeth Short was born on the 29th of July, 1924. And that basically means that, that's what we have. Now, to keep in mind, we do not have a birth time for her. So we do know the stars, but we're not going to be able to say much about the ascendant. And so let me give you a bit of information. Now, Elizabeth was called the Black Dahlia, but her name was, as I said, Elizabeth Short. She's found in the Leimert Park area. But we're going to stop first and go first to her. She was a native of Boston, and she was born in New England, and that's where she spent her early years besides Florida before she relocated to California. And she came here because, one, her father lived here, and secondly, it is commonly held that she was an aspiring actress, but she didn't yet have any credits or jobs to her name at that time. She was 22 years old at the time of the crime, and the name came posthumously. So her murder is unsolved and has a lasting cultural intrigue, much like the Jack the Ripper murders. It has various theories and much speculation. Her life and death have been the basis of numerous books and films, much like the Jack the Ripper killings, and is cited as one of the most famous crimes in U.S. history and one of the oldest unsolved cases in Los Angeles County. So it's one of the first major crimes in post-war America to capture national attention. Now, much has been made about her and her story, and some stories make her out to be some sort of, they say she was a sex worker and she got killed, applying her trade. Here's my point, what I want to say about that. First of all, we don't actually have any proof that she was a sex worker, and even if she were, she's entitled to have a safe, secure working environment and the ability to ply her trade without getting hurt. And part of that is that, as we talked about in Jack the Ripper, sex workers were commonly and are still commonly targeted. So I'm not going to allow that to be a reason, to not give her the due she's due. She was a person who lived and had dreams, and she deserves, even posthumously, even over 70. It's going to be 80 years in 2027. And she'd be well into her hundreds by then. So she'd be 100 years old this year, and she deserves, to be treated in death with respect. And so let me give you her chart details, end of rant. Give her chart details on her. So she was a Leo sun. Let me go here. So Leo sun. There is a lot of information to looking at a chart. Are you? Seriously. So sun in Leo. Moon in Cancer. The sun was at 11 degrees, 13 minutes of Leo. And the moon was at 11 degrees, 55 Cancer. And so we don't have houses, but what I can say about that Leo is, if you're wanting to be an actor, she probably wanted attention. She was attractive. She had dark hair, really fair skin, blue eyes. That would have caused quite a stir, arriving in California in the 40s. But keeping in mind, a lot of other people also had that dream. And so she wouldn't have been alone hanging out in LA trying to get noticed. There are also a lot of pretty things coming from all over the country and sometimes the world to try to get their name known. Cancer moon wants safety, wants security, which would be at odds with being an actress, because acting is speculative and you have to put in a lot of effort and you have to deal with rejection. And so I imagine that, if I'm going to say this, Elizabeth might have had a problem with rejection, depending on the rest of her chart. She might have felt, more hurt. So she had a lot of dominance in Leo, Cancer, and Pisces, and her dominant planets are Jupiter, the Moon, and the Sun. And so that is the kind of energy of her chart. And her sun was in Leo, as I said, and alongside for the ride in the same house was Neptune. So that's kind of fifth house energy and co-present, as it were. So that's kind of the energy that's you're not sure kind of energy. Neptune is to dissolve the ego, not create the ego, and so make it more of a spiritual thing, but you're not exactly certain. So there's a mystery to her. You'll find lots of speculation, but it's very hard to nail down. Her sun is at home in its own sign, so it doesn't disposit anywhere. And basically that says is that sun is free to be creative, to express themselves, to, play if they like. So probably a warm, gregarious person who could be nurturing and loving. At the top of the chart, we have Saturn in Libra at the 26th degree, and Saturn in Libra is an exaltation. And so if you put it in the seventh house, someone who really wants to have a long-term relationship, she'd be attracted to tactful people who liked harmony, people who probably, cool, calm demeanors, kind of thing. That's what she'd be attracted to, because that's the seventh house. And someone with charm, maybe a little bit older, because Saturn is, older, a little bit more responsible. At also the top of the chart, co-present is both retrograde, is Mars and Uranus in the 12th house, both retrograde and co-present, but not, as I said. And Piscean energy is compassion, kindness, but also a bit of fantasy. The thing about that is, in a good way, someone with a lot of imagination. Someone who, and since the Uranus is here, someone who is a bit unconventional also, but you wouldn't see it unless you got close enough. this is a night chart, which means that Venus and Mars are the most important, so let's go find out where they're hanging out. The moon, as I said, is in Cancer. Mars is in Pisces. The moon is at 11. Mars is at 5. That's a little wide, but this is a birth chart. And so that would be a trine. And so internally, a compassionate, caring, and very sensitive individual, which could be good, nurturing, or smothering. Sensitive, or fragile. That all depends. And that energy with the trine means intuitive, can read people's emotional states quite nicely. And we've got Venus at 1 degree of Venus at 1 degree of Cancer, and hermetically that is considered an exaltation. That means that someone who's naturally caring and nurturing, and it's in the 4th house, as I said, because we don't have a time. And so Venus and Mars and the moon would be the top looking ats in this chart. The moon is in Cancer, the place of domicile. Mars is in the 12th house, which is not a strong place. It means motivation, but that motivation may not entirely be consistent because it's in Pisces, and Pisces is a mutable sign, so that motivation is going to change based on her feelings. And that the desire to find a nurturing relationship, to have a warm and caring home. So it kind of, in my opinion, is at odds with the desire to be an actress, which is to be seen and to be heard. That's what her sun wants. But her moon is more private and is less interested in being seen and being heard like that. She's looking to be seen and be heard, but by specific people, by people that she can trust. People, because the moon is about your safety needs, she's looking for a home, a place of stability, a place where she can belong, which seems to be at odds with the desire to be an actress, an aspiring actress. And as I've said, she didn't have any credits yet at the time of her death. So that is the information that I have. Now, by the way, astrology is a lens, and it's not a definitive answer. So, can I say this is definitively who she was? No, I cannot, and neither can anyone else. So, this is an exploration. She might have also been, because of that trine, a bit more trusting than, you're young, you're 22, you're going out in the world, you came from the other side of the country to a world of glamour where everything's beautiful and pretty, so you may not yet know or have the experience to ascertain whom you should trust and whom you shouldn't trust. So she probably was a bit more, very artistic, very sweet maybe, but a bit more trusting probably, given her age. This is mere speculation, by the way, than maybe she should have been. That is not to blame her, it's just to say that's what I read in the chart. Okay? So, Elizabeth's natal chart, as I've went into, so, it's like I said, to give you a summary, the sun in Leo, there's that allure of the spotlight. But the allure of the spotlight is you have to put yourself in contact with the entertainment industry, and that entertainment industry has shadows. How much contact did she have with the entertainment industry? Because what was above board looked beautiful. But if you read some of those, watch documentaries as I do, and read autobiographies, you find out there's a lot more darkness that you don't get to see on top, that is hidden from view. So what shadows might she have seen with that sun in Leo, the desire for a spotlight, and the shadows of that spotlight, which also includes mental health issues? And given her sensitivity, that might have been a challenge. The moon in Scorpio. So there's she doesn't have the moon in Scorpio, I'm sorry. I miswrote that as a note. So her moon is in Cancer. And like I said, very sensitive, very kind sort of vibe. So the moon in Cancer is deep emotions. The desire for safety, to find people she can feel safe with, to talk to be with. Maybe to create a home with, people that felt like home. Her Venus in Cancer would be a yearning for nurturing connections. And her Mars in Pisces would be a fantastical energy. It would be a desire to escape, to transcend the everyday. Because to just be honest, coming out to LA when you aren't a rich person, even in 1947, would have meant having to count that money, those pennies as it were, with a great deal of discernment, which means that arriving in LA, she would have been immediately faced with the disparity between the image that she saw in films growing up of the beautiful people who lived in LA and the truth of the situation, the cold, hard, brutal, sometimes brutal reality of what the city actually looked like and the city she actually experienced when she finally arrived here with her suitcases. Many a story has started with us being seduced by glamour that turned out to have shadows. Neptune's influence is about illusions, dreams, and the veil of deception. Okay? So let me have a quick look at Neptune, because I don't think I've mentioned that. But since we're talking about, in Leo, the shadows of fame, the shadows of glamour, the shadows of pleasure, all of that. Neptune is about illusion. She bought into the illusion, as we all do. You know, when you're young, you see something amazing, you're thinking, I'll have some of that. And so Neptune talks about the illusions and deceptions and the dreams. And so that's about the dream. The fifth house is about the ability to express yourself as an actress, to maybe be a famous actress. And the veil of deception that gets ripped away when you finally arrive in the city and are faced with the reality of the gritty LA, as opposed to the beautiful dresses and gowns you saw on the major screens. And so let's move on to cosmic timing. So the stars on that fateful day is what we're going to step into next. So on the morning of the 15th of January 1947, the sun was in Capricorn at 24 degrees. The moon was in Scorpio at 11 degrees. It was a third quarter moon, which means it was 270 degrees ahead of the sun and also 90 degrees behind it. That is a state of crisis of consciousness, needing to evaluate oneself, needing to be responsible and and assessing things. The Mercury is at 19 degrees. Venus is of Capricorn. Venus is in Sagittarius at 8. Mars is in Capricorn at 22. Jupiter is at 22 of Scorpio. Saturn is at 6 degrees Leo. Uranus is at 18 degrees of Gemini. Neptune is at 10 degrees of Libra. And Pluto is at 12 degrees of Leo. The North Node is at 9 degrees of Gemini, and Lilith is at 28 degrees Sagittarius, and Chiron is in Scorpio at 7 degrees. And so this is the chart that for that particular day. And like I said, we only have that it's morning. So I had to pick morning because 15 of January would still have been dark too early in the morning. So obviously it was still when it was light out. It was at that point light outside. So that was her birth data, and this is the date of her death. Uranus was in Gemini, and so we've got a shock of the unexpected in that. Gemini is inquisitive, but Uranus is the unexpected. And as I said, I'm not going to go. They found her in Leimert Park in an open field. She was disrobed and left in 2 pieces. There were ligature marks on the body at the time of autopsy, but that's about as far as I feel comfortable going. And as I've said, if I've not said trigger warning once again, there will be brief descriptions. Pluto was in Leo at that point. I like to make certain that my notes are correct. but I'm reading a Pluto and Leo type vibe. And let me go here. It was at 12 degrees in Leo. I should also note that Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, as well as the node, are all retrograde in this chart. And so Uranus at 18 degrees, that would be more, like I said, the unexpected would be happening. And we're talking about inquisitiveness. We're talking about commerce, trade, all that sort of thing. But we're also talking about intellect and the mind. And so there would be a shock of the unexpected. And the first person on the scene was someone from the media, a photography person who, his name was Aggie, and I don't want to go to, like I said, this is an astrology podcast, which is why I'm short on these crime details and longer on the astrology info, but Aggie was there first on the scene and took pictures of the crime, which I'm certain must have been hella shocking. Pluto and Leo the theme would be transformation through darkness. Now, the Pluto and Leo vibe is an exaltation. Pluto is the ego, but it's also the shadow. Leo is self-expression and play. But this is a very dark event. We have a young woman left out in the open, displayed and posed. According to the people who saw the scene on that day, her body was very particularly posed, and so potentially a message. Saturn is about karmic lessons and restrictions. And in the case of this chart, not Elizabeth's chart, but the chart of the death, it was at 6 degrees of Leo. And so we're looking at the shadows of glamour, the shadows of fame, or its pursuit. And the hard lesson is that in the extreme, the pursuit of fame, the pursuit of that glamour can be a challenge for you, because keeping in mind, when you go out into the entertainment industry, even in the 40s, it still was a dangerous place to be. And the people had one image that you saw publicly and could be an entirely different person privately. And so the hard lesson of Saturn retrograde is that you don't always know people as well as you think, and that the outward image that they present may not be the same as who they are on the inside, that there are perils to leaving home for the pursuit of fame and etc. So on the day before, so on the 9th of 1947, Elizabeth went home to Los Angeles, and she'd been to San Diego with a friend named Red, who was a 25-year-old married salesman, and they were seeing each other. He drops her off at the Biltmore Hotel downtown, still standing to this day, listeners, and that she was there to meet her sister, who was visiting from Boston that afternoon. And by all accounts, or at least some of them, staff at the Biltmore says they recall seeing her at the lobby telephone. Shortly after, she was seen, allegedly, by patrons at a grill known as the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, located at Olive Street, which was about 3/8 of a mile away from the Biltmore in downtown L.A. On the morning of 1947, that'd be January 15th, she was found between Coliseum Street and West 39th Street, which is, on the west side of South Norton Avenue. That's where they found her, and that's the neighborhood of Leimert Park, which at that point was largely underdeveloped. So she was found in a vacant lot. And the death occurred either between the evening of January 14th to the early morning of the 15th. And it was washed and given her the Gazglow smile, meaning that he created a smile for her, and took time before displaying her where everyone would then see her in that field on that day. And that's when Aggie, who worked at that point for Los Angeles Herald Express, was the first to arrive, took several photos of the crime scene, and near the body, the detectives found a heel print in the ground and tire tracks, and also a cement sack containing a watery blood was also found nearby. And on the 16th, the autopsy began, and then began the longest, a pretty long manhunt, which did not yield nearly enough viable suspects. And to this day, 80 years later, almost 80 years later, is still an unsolved crime, and as I said, one of the longest. And so we're going to next step into the lunar nodes. Let's check out where they happen to be hanging out on that particular day. So the north node is located at 9 degrees of Gemini, which means the south node will be at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. And so those could be the role of destiny in tragedy would be the key word there. This is a tragic event. What could this tell us about? The north node is in Gemini, but the south node be in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a Jupiter-ruled sign, very expansive. It's about it would be about travel, which she did, but it will also be about meeting people who are very different from you, and that house placement would also give a good key. But like I said, I'm not reading that because we don't have a proper ascendant for which to make this judgment call. So I'd say probably when you're dealing with this, that north node in Gemini would be about being very objective and being less emotional in your thinking. Now, everybody is emotional when they make decisions. Everybody. Can't escape it. But doing your best to step away from your emotional bent in order to make a decision on whether or not this person is trustworthy. And I say this as someone who was a lot more trusting than I am now. I've had to have my north nodes are in an air sign and a fire sign, like in this chart, and that is learning that your enthusiasm, your excitement must be tempered with a good amount of logic. That's how I'd read that. Now, Los Angeles, let's call it a city under starry skies. Los Angeles was founded on the 4th of September, 1781. And that means the sun was in Virgo. And so that's about meticulous details, but it's also about anxiety and harsh criticism. So it would be a reaction to whatever's going on the East Coast. We're setting this up as a means of making a social statement about the way things were run on the other side of the country. Now, Los Angeles, the sun was at 12 degrees of Virgo, the moon is at 0 degrees Aries, Mercury is at 26 degrees of Leo, Venus is at 7 degrees Libra, Mars at 17 degrees Capricorn, Jupiter at 21 degrees of Scorpio, Saturn is at 13 degrees Sagittarius, Uranus is at 2 degrees Cancer, Neptune is at 4 degrees Libra, Pluto is at 4 degrees Aquarius and retrograde. The node is at 27 degrees Aries, also retrograde. Lilith is at 19 degrees Aries, and Chiron is at 10 degrees of Taurus and retrograde. There is a lot of Aries. I see the moon is in Aries, and I see the north node and Lilith are both in Aries. Venus and Neptune are in Aries with a 3 degree spread. That is a conjunction. That means the ability to be fanciful and glamorous was there from the beginning. By the way, 1781 is also the year that Uranus was discovered by a telescope. And we have the sun ruled by Mercury in Leo at 26 degrees, and so very expressionistic, warm and playful, but kind of see me, hear me kind of energy. Leo and the North Node are in a trine together, so that ability to take that energy, to take your enthusiasm, your passion and excitement and your courage and point it in a direction and say, I want to create this, I want to do this. So a kind of a can-do, independent, see me, hear me kind of energy, and motivated by things that people might not be always aware of. It might be hidden. The real motivations are going to be hidden because the North Node is retrograde. We've got Venus in Libra, Neptune in Libra. Venus is in one of the signs that it rules, the day sign that it rules, and so not a bad position for it. It just means a bit more fanciful and more likely to be peace-loving, harmony, and about beauty, but not necessarily about reality. When Neptune is involved, reality will always be in question. There'll be illusion in question. And so Neptune is in Libra. We want to make things pretty. We want to make things lovely. We want things to be a beautiful pink bubble floating through space. And so the deception and illusion of LA is that it is exactly that. Dreams, glamour, but also lurking nightmares. LA is a dream hole. That's what I call a place that promises so much and delivers so little to so many people. Uranus's aspects. So let's check those out. So Uranus is hanging out at 2 degrees of Cancer. It is in a square with Neptune, and also in a square with the Moon. The Moon says this is an independence, individualization. Individuality is a very big thing here. But it's square that Uranus in Cancer. Uranus in Cancer is unexpected, this emotional uprisings within. So in Cancer, unconventional belonging, unconventional home, unconventional sense of safety, which the Moon in Aries would be the ruler of, meaning the shot caller of, meaning I want to be independent. I want to be an individual. I want to call the shots. And that means there's going to be some disruptions to family values, for example, because Cancer stands for those family values, and they're going to get upended when you're thinking of yourself as an individual and less of a community, which is not entirely a terrible thing. It would also, that Neptune is also, we got Aquarius, Pluto, and it is at 4 degrees, and it is in a trine with Pluto. Pluto is about the ego, the shadow, the other. It's the other. So this is a town where the in crowd runs things, and if you ain't part of that crowd, you ain't in. I'm sorry, but that's just the way that is. And Pluto is retrograde. So power, issues of power and control and darkness, if you don't fit into that very narrow view of what beauty and glamour is supposed to look like, and if you don't follow the rules, because there are rules, even if it appears like there are no rules, there are rules. They're just not spoken rules. And so that is the September 4, 1781 chart. Mars is hanging out in Capricorn, so this is it works if you work it type of energy. It is in a 4-degree sextile with Jupiter. So the motivations of Jupiter and Scorpio, not a comfortable energy for it, but the motivation is there, that it's always about power and it's going to be hidden. What people really want, what they really say they want, are going to be two different things. So the interplay between the city and the crime is the promise of glamour is a deception. It allows people to jump to the conclusion that everything is as beautiful, as starry-eyed, as glamour, glitzy, shiny, and polished as the pictures on magazines and the movies and the stories you hear about celebrities allow you to believe. And the crime is not the footnotes, the exclamation point that says that everything that you think about this illusion that you've been deceived into believing from the very beginning is false. That the really cold hard reality here is that only a small amount of the people who ever come here are ever going to end up living out that beautiful Neptunian glamour deceptive illusion that is LA, that most people are going to be faced with the cold hard reality, as the crime suggests, that this place is hardly the place of beautiful fantasies and wishes. It can also be a place of darkness, depravity, and nightmares. And that is one of the things that I would like to highlight. That the themes here is that the illusion and the reality are oppositions, and you're going to be faced with one or another at any time, but more than likely you'll be faced with the darkness of the illusion and the awareness of that deception. So, to bring it in, that crime on the 15th of January 1947, the Black Dahlia Elizabeth Short murder, in stark contrast, brings out the idea that all that glitters is not gold, and that underneath this brilliant, beautiful city and all of its illusions of gorgeousness is darkness, depravity, and danger. And that'll be it for this episode. So we're going to sign off right now. Thank you very much for listening. And part 2 will be coming up, and we'll be talking about the killer's cosmic blueprint astrologically. So thank you very much. Ponder your own celestial connections, and remember that we are not looking into the darkness to champion it or to laud it, but is to be aware of it. Thank you very much, star people, and peace.